All right, I want to welcome everybody to our weekly, actually twice a week, program that we've been doing during this pandemic. And it is me having conversations with different people and in different segments of society, talking about how their area of the world is being impacted by the pandemic. And I've got Alabama attorney John Watts with me. Good afternoon, John. Good to see you, bud.
Hey, you too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you've got a little bit of time and be able to educate us a little bit today. But what we're talking about, guys, and this is not just important during the pandemic, it's important all the time, is consumer protection issues, identity theft, credit reporting, all of that stuff that we don't like to dive into, but it's so important that we know what we're talking about and why we need to talk about it. And that's why I've got John. He's so good at this. That's why I've got him on today. But before we dive into our topics, John, tell us a little bit about your practice and the kind of work that you and Stan do.
Sure. So there's Stan Herring, my partner, and we practice really across the state. And a big part of our practice is consumer litigation. So we're helping consumers maybe sue debt collectors or credit bureaus or mortgage companies, or maybe they're being sued by a debt collector or they're dealing with identity theft. So really that whole range of issues we help people with all over the state.
And now that we are, what, 10 weeks, 11 weeks, whatever it is, some days I can't even remember what day of the week it is, much less a number of weeks. Now that we're so many months now, and some of the dust, if you will, of the initial stages of the pandemic, and people are kind of starting to settle into the new normal, the new routines. John, in the past many weeks, with so many people filing for unemployment record numbers and the stimulus checks and the other types of incentives and things that the government has put out there for us, all of these things just compile or add on to all the stress everyone is already under. But what are you seeing in your practice if you that are of concerns about the pandemic when it comes to consumer issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple of things that we're seeing a good bit, and that is we're starting to see foreclosures really start to spike up. Now, to some extent, because there are some protections for certain types of mortgages. So if you have like a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, some of these what are called federally backed loans, those are really being pushed out. So you can get even up to 12 months of forbearance where you don't have to make a payment. But even with all that said, just the massive unemployment we're having, again, we're seeing those numbers of foreclosures start to go up. And that's causing a lot of stress because people have either lost their job completely and maybe they're getting unemployment, but I think we all know that's not going to last forever, particularly the sort of heightened unemployment, the extra $600 a week. And so maybe they haven't even lost their job, but the hours have come down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're sort of watching our savings go down, saying what's going to happen next month or the 2 months from now or 3 months from now. And so there's a lot of stress with that. And then we have debt collectors that, and I say this not in a critical way because they're legitimate business. They're out to make money, but they're looking at the situation saying that there is less money out there to get. And there is more debt, exploding debt. So they've really got to hustle to get that money. So if I owe 5 different collectors, well, whichever one is sort of screaming the loudest, the theory is that's the one that I'll pay. And so you have all that happening with loss of income. And then thinking about for most of us, outside of a health issue or something like that, one of the worst things would be losing our home.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, what do you do after you lose your home? How do you go get a new place? How do you get an apartment? How do you buy a new house if you have a foreclosure? So all of that is coming together and causing a lot of stress.
Well, where do we begin? Where are where should we start pointing people in the direction to review? And they may already know what their situation is, but how can people stay on top of this and be informed and do something proactive as opposed to being reactive? Because when you're reactive, as we all know, something already adverse has happened, and now you're having to scramble to protect what you can or to deal with it. And instead of putting our heads in the proverbial sand, John, what do you recommend people do to kind of stay ahead of the game and maybe hopefully reduce a little bit of that stress that we all know is there?
Well, one thing, and this is not, the most important thing, but it's a good kind of foundation, is to check your credit report. So there's a place totally free. You don't have to put in a credit card. Yeah, there's no monthly fee for it. It's annualcreditreport.com. And like the name suggests, once a year you can pull from Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, except during this time we can pull once per week. So it's a really important benefit. And so I recommend everybody just pull your credit reports, you print them, save them to PDF, and now you have a record. Plus you can see what's out there. If you look on your inquiries and you see there are debt collectors on there, well, that's a sign that something is happening. And then this will fit in with the next thing, which is about the mortgage. Call your mortgage company and say, look, do I qualify? The law is called the CARES Act, CARES. And it's the, giant stimulus law, to help everybody. Well, a part of that is that if you have a federally backed mortgage, you are entitled to up to 6 months of forbearance where you don't have to make a payment. And at the end of that 6 months, you can get up to another 6 months of forbearance. So technically you could go a year without making your mortgage payment, and this will prevent a foreclosure. And if you're current right now, but as you sort of look into the future, say, there's no way I can keep this going, and you can get that forbearance, then during that whole 12 months, your credit report will not be impacted by that. That's part of the law, is that if you're current, sort of when you go into this, then all the way through, they have to show you as being current. So that protects your ability to go get credit, security clearances for work, things of that nature. So I would say start with credit reports and then talk to your mortgage company and say, hey, do I qualify? Because look, in years past, to get what's called a loan modification, it was a really in-depth process. I mean, back and forth, and they're asking for, your report card from second grade. And I may be exaggerating, or I may not
Really
be.
not far from it.
But with this, literally, if you have a federally backed loan, they're supposed to say, have you been affected by COVID-19? As long as you can honestly say, yes, I have, I want the forbearance, then you qualify. Okay. It's not anything more complicated than that. Now, if you don't have a federally backed loan, then you just need to ask your company, hey, do you have some other program for me? Mm-hmm. And we always recommend people document everything very, very carefully. So if they tell you, hey, you can go 6 months without making a payment, if you don't get something in writing from them, you send them something in writing. Mm-hmm. Hey, this is to document my call I had on June the 8th at 2:33 p.m. where you told me I had 6 months. So that would be I think a really good starting point. Get those credit reports. And then that next big thing is the house. How do we protect our house?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all about being proactive, guys. The issues do not go away just because you ignore them. If you get a statement in the mail, if you still get regular mail, and you put it on the pile with the other ones from the last few months, that doesn't help anything. But it's, I'm sure, very stressful for many people for many reasons right now, not just from a financial standpoint, from a health standpoint, from a family well-being and communication. There's so many stress points right now, and this is just one of them. But regardless if we're in a pandemic or not, these are some very wise tips from John that really you should adhere to at any point in time. And John, let's kind of pivot away from mortgages for just a minute And let's talk about credit cards and credit debt, credit card debt, and those types of things. You had mentioned getting your credit reports. And by the way, I put the links not only to your firm's website, but also to the annualcreditreport.com website. So all you have to do is click on those. And what I meant to also say early in this discussion is John has a extremely active YouTube channel, and I'll get to that and put it in there. But guys, there are hundreds of videos on there all about this. I'll let John tell us a little bit more about that. But John, talking about credit cards, why is it so important to stay on top of that situation as well?
Well, if I can take a step back, like you said, we've got this pandemic. There's obviously a lot of um, uncertainty and strife in our country right now. So there are all these issues, and it's very easy for us to say, you know what, I don't have time to think about that credit card debt, or there's bigger things going on in the nation right now. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes we got to do both. We got to focus on these big issues, but if we don't pay our water bill, we may have our water turned off or our power turned off. So same thing with credit card. If we get behind, that can impact our credit score. And, that can sort of, if you've ever run down a hill and you're going so fast, if we start missing a payment or two, it can be really hard to recover from that. So again, I would suggest if you're having trouble making a credit card payment, just call your company and say, do you have any help for me? Now, they're not obligated to help you, but a lot of the companies will. And if we go back to that CARES Act, that sort of big law, it says any company that credit reports on you, and the technical name is a furnisher because they furnish credit report information on you. If they give you any type of accommodation, that could be, hey, skip a payment, make a half payment, whatever it is, then whatever your credit reporting is at that moment, it's to stay the same, whether they give you 2 months or 6 months or however long. So again, very valuable. But the key is the communication. Like you were saying, Bernard, I mean, you get these letters, and it's kind of like we help people with IRS tax issues, and they come in with a stack of certified mail letters from the IRS. Look, nobody walks into their house from their mailbox and says, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I got an IRS certified mail letter. Okay. Yeah. It's never good news. Okay. And you may have heard this before, but it's the old line that no good news comes by certified mail, and so nobody wants to open that. And I'm not saying you have to immediately open, but a day or two, like we got to know what's out there, and then we can deal with it. But if we don't know, even though we think it's not affecting us, it is. It's in the back of our mind. Sure, and so just being proactive, like you said.
Well, John, I don't know if you saw the other day, NPR put out, the title of it is Millions of Americans Skip Payments as Tidal Wave of Defaults and Evictions Looms. And one of the things in there that I found to be interesting is that sometimes when these individuals like homeowners contact their lending institutions, sometimes they get misleading information, or they may be dealing with somebody who was looking at the wrong file at the time they were talking to them, or it was somebody who wasn't properly trained or fully trained. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons, but how can individuals stay on top of this if they feel like, I don't think I'm being told the right information, then they rely on it, and then they don't qualify for any of the forgiveness or the forbearance at the time. I mean, there's only so much I can, as a consumer, can do, but I need to be proactive.
Yeah, and one thing is, again, to document. So if you call in and when they answer the phone, they say, please be advised, all calls may be recorded. Well, then I take the position. Not everybody agrees, but I take the position. That means they're consenting to you recording, and you can obviously consent to recording and record the conversation. And then more than that, particularly if there's something odd, if let's say that your mortgage company says, hey, 6 months, you don't have to make a payment. but we are going to report you as negative on your credit report, even though you have this federally backed loan. You go, I'm not sure that's right. Well, send them a letter. Now, you can always get with a lawyer, but you can also send them a letter and say, look, I made the call. I mean, if we make calls with our cell phone, we say, okay, I called at 2:15. It was an 18-minute, 14-second phone call. Here's what I was told. Is this correct? You let me know. It's harder for the mortgage company or the credit card company or whoever to kind of change the rules when it's recorded and when you followed it up in writing. And now if you send them something in writing, send it certified, where you get the green card back so you can prove it. And because again, like we said, no good news comes by certified mail. Let them be on the receiving end of that certified mail.
John, these are big, huge institutions and organizations. And the typical consumer is just one individual or a family, a couple, whatever it is. And they may feel intimidated. They may feel, how in the world can I go up against X, Y, and Z company? I owe 6 figures on my mortgage or my credit card debt or whatever it is. Well, what do they need to do besides come and meet with an experienced consumer protection attorney like you?
Well, and we're always welcome, and willing to meet with people. But one thing I would say is when you're talking, so, you pick up the phone, you call these places, it is intimidating. But here's sort of something you can think about that will change the dynamics of it. If you think about it in terms of not that I'm going and I'm going to be run over by this big company, but if we'll just remember what we learned in English class, there are certain words we learn: who, what, when, why, where, how. Okay, those words. Your sentences should start with those. What type of loan do I have? What are my options? When do I need to make this payment? You just ask questions. And so if you think of yourself as a reporter, say, well, I'm just here to gain information. It really sort of levels the playing field because, particularly like, let's say a debt collector calls you. And I've had these before. We're just out of the blue, you answer your phone and it's somebody and they say, you owe this money. How would you like to pay? Like, well, excuse me, who are you? Okay. What are you calling about? And the illustration I give people is imagine, no COVID-19 going on. And all of a sudden there's a knock on your door. You open the door and there's some guy standing there. He says, I'm here to get that money. Go ahead and give me $5,000. Well, assuming you don't slam the door or call the cops, what would you say? You go, I'm sorry, who are you? He goes, well, my name is Bob. You owe $5,000. Well, Bob, what do I owe $5,000 for? Well, it's an old credit card debt. Which old credit card debt? Yeah. And you would just ask questions. You wouldn't say, wait just a minute, let me go run and get my wallet. Okay. So same thing when we're on the phone, we ask questions to make sure that we're not getting scammed.
Well, that was leading me to my next thing. It is so sophisticated these days, the way scammers can get you on the phone or send you electronic communications in some way through social media, through email, or just regular phone calls, and they'll sound so genuine and so authentic. But there are certain things that you really should know as a consumer. For example, the IRS is not going to call you up in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon or at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night to initiate a communication saying you owe X and here's why. So I want you to kind of address that a little bit, John, about what are the proper communication methods. And if you're going to get an inquiry of some sort, whether it's the IRS or your credit card, mortgage, whatever it is, that it's not going to be just a phone call on a given Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. And I will say this, collectors will call and they may be legitimate, but again, think about that guy knocking on your door. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't just say, oh, sure, let me give you $5,000 or come back every first of the month, I'll hand you $500. We'd say, well, I want to see some proof of this. And so ultimately, particularly if the call's coming into you or the email's coming to you, I would say, send me something in writing. And when I say in writing, I mean a real letter with a stamp on it. And the legitimate companies will say, no problem. I mean, think about it. If you owe your doctor some money and say, well, can you send me a bill? Your doctor, she's going to say, of course I will. We'll send you a bill out. But the scammers do not want to send a letter across state lines with the stamp on it. They're worried about
and why is that?
Mail fraud and things like that. So that's just a very simple way to test, to say, you send me something in writing. They'll say, okay, what's your email address? You go, no. I want a real letter. They go, okay, what's your fax number? Nope. I want a real letter. Once you put a stamp on it, I want the postal service to bring me your letter. And the scammers hate that. And they'll say, that would be an invasion of our privacy. It just makes no sense.
Yeah.
But just sort of push them on that. And again, like you said, the IRS is not going to call you up. And I mean, there was one person that they were getting, this particular scam was the IRS was calling saying, you need to pay with an iTunes gift card. Okay.
Right.
The IRS does not ask for iTunes gift cards.
Right. Or go down to Western Union and wire us money by 4 o'clock, or we'll start. While it's easy to kind of make fun of these scenarios, when you're on the receiving end of this, it takes a while to sink in, particularly if it's a good script that they're reading from. The other thing I was going to say along these lines, John, is sometimes if you're the victim, a past victim of identity theft or credit card fraud, or even, and this is what I've had tax returns filled in my name and sent in and refunds received, and I never knew anything about it. It's happened twice in the last decade. So now I can't file my returns electronically anymore. It has to be stamped through snail mail, the old-fashioned way, and I get a secret code PIN number and all of that. So while it may seem like it's common sense to not allow these people to invade your privacy and to put added stress on you, sometimes because of past experiences you may have had, you're kind of second guessing things at times.
Yeah, and that's why asking for stuff in writing, it kind of slows down the process a little bit. And look, I know that there are legitimate places that sometimes do weird things. I was buying a house one time, and this was not a scam or anything, but the realtor on the other side said, well, you need to make a deposit. And she gave me a deadline, and it was out of state. I couldn't be there. And she goes, well, can you Western Union me the money? I'm like, I am not Western Union. Yeah. I don't even know what that word is, but I'm not sending you a Western Union for X number of thousands of dollars. And so if it just sounds weird or odd, I would just say, don't do it, because it's better to be safe than sorry. And just one sort of illustration of that, there's a lot of fraud when buying houses. Mm-hmm. So you buy a house and you get an email that looks like it's from the closing attorney, but there's just one little letter off. And it says, okay, here's the account to wire your money. And I mean, I have people probably every 6 months will get somebody that they've sent $50,000, $100,000, and that money's gone.
Yeah.
And so the seller, I mean, they feel bad for the buyer, but they're like, we didn't steal your money. Yeah. And so again, we just have to be really careful, and sometimes doing it the old fashioned way, snail mail, certified mail, hey, I'm going to hand you a cashier's check, like take a cashier's check to the closing attorney instead of wiring the money.
Right.
And we have to understand that these people that do scams are very sophisticated. I mean, imagine, Bernard, if they took their mental energy and actually did something good in the world. Okay. These are really talented people. Yeah. And so, we're not constantly on guard for this. And so when something just strikes us as a little bit odd, I'd listen to your gut on that.
And certainly reach out to people like John Watts and his partner Stan for these types of issues. Now, John, I've put a link to the YouTube channel for you guys. Guys, there's over 1,000 videos on there. And John does such a great job of educating the public about consumer protection issues. John, how can people reach you if they wanted to call or email or get in touch with you about these issues?
Sure. And I appreciate putting the YouTube channel on there. So, two easiest ways: go to our main website, alabamaconsumer.com. There's a contact us portion there, or just call us 205-879-2447. And either way is good. And we'll be happy to chat with anybody. And, our philosophy, Bernard, is we want to help people understand their options and then encourage them to take action, because yeah, I've been guilty of this where I'll gain knowledge but not do anything with it. Well, you might as well not have it. So we want people to know their rights and to take action. So that's our website, our videos, everything is designed for that.
And guys, as you've heard John say this afternoon, be proactive. Don't be reactive. Don't wait. Don't sit by and think that the issue will go away, because it never, ever does unless you're proactive about it and do something, because they're not always correct. You may get a communication or a letter or whatever it is from a mortgage lender, and for all you know, they have the wrong guy. They may be the account is wrong and they happen to send you the letter and not the next guy. So be proactive, get in touch with John. All of these consumer protection issues, while they do apply during the pandemic, and John's addressed the CARES Act, and he's got videos that explain more about that and how you can take advantage if you qualify. But all of these issues certainly apply well after the pandemic has gone away. So, John, I want to thank you again for your expertise and your time and teaching us a little bit about how to protect ourselves, how to protect our consumer issues. Our consumer protections and credit reporting and whatever it may be dealing with our finances. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And guys, as we've been doing for many weeks now, we're going to continue to do it. Every Monday and Thursday, we're going to have about 30 minutes discussions with different areas of society that are being impacted by the pandemic. And we're going to keep doing these. And I want to thank everybody for stopping by, and we will talk to you again another time. We will.
Thank you.